Aaron Pierre turned down a multi-million-dollar role. The reason will shock you. Aaron Pierre was no longer just a promising actor. He was the real deal. After years of grinding to carve out his place in the industry, he had finally become one of the most sought-after names in Hollywood. His phone never stopped ringing. Renowned directors wanted to work with him. Invitations to exclusive events, luxury brand campaigns, multi-million-dollar contracts. His career was at its peak, but nothing compared to the offer he had just received. His agent, James Cartwright, nearly lost it when he got the call. "Aaron, listen, you're not going to believe this. They want you. But this isn't just any movie. It's the movie." Aaron frowned, intrigued. "What do you mean by the movie?" James took a deep breath, trying to contain his excitement. "Billion-dollar franchise. Lead role. Multiple films locked in. You're about to become the face of the biggest action saga of the next decade." Aaron leaned back on the couch, letting the weight of that information sink in. The impact of this opportunity couldn't be overstated. Hollywood was a ruthless game. Actors could be forgotten overnight. But this role would change everything. The next day, he was escorted to a private meeting with the studio executives. The office was lavish, with massive glass windows reflecting the golden city skyline at sunset. The air reeked of power. In the center of the room stood a gleaming marble table. Seated around it were three of the most influential men in the film industry. Aaron shook hands with each of them, his grip firm. He knew this was a power play, and he had to exude confidence. But deep down, his stomach was in knots. After a few minutes of polite conversation, one of the executives opened a leather folder and slid a contract across the table. "Here it is, Aaron. All you have to do is sign." Aaron picked up the pen. His hands were steady, but then, out of nowhere, something inside him hesitated. A strange tightness in his chest. He glanced around the room. Everyone was waiting for his yes. For the first time, he felt the need to stop and think. "Can I read it first?" he asked. The silence that followed was brief but thick with tension. Of course," one of the executives said, forcing a smile. Aaron flipped through the pages quickly. The figures were outrageous. A massive salary for the first film, bonuses that could triple his earnings if the box office hit certain targets. But hidden within the clauses, something caught his eye. A specific requirement. Small, subtle, but wrong. He read it again, making sure he wasn't imagining things. But there it was. His stomach churned. He looked up at the executives. "What does this mean?" The men exchanged glances before answering. "Just standard contractual details, Aaron. Nothing to worry about." But he knew it wasn't that simple. And that was when everything started to fall apart. Aaron left the meeting with a weight on his chest. He should have been celebrating. This was the biggest contract of his career, the chance to become one of the most recognizable faces in cinema. But instead of excitement, all he felt was an inexplicable discomfort. He crossed the parking lot without saying a word. James, his agent, followed closely behind, still buzzing with excitement. "Aaron, man, this is huge. Do you have any idea what just happened in there?" Aaron didn't answer. He got into the car and sat in silence for a few moments, staring at the contract resting on the passenger seat. James noticed his hesitation and sighed. "Please don't tell me you're freaking out. Don't tell me you're about to start with the whole I need to think thing." Aaron turned to face him. "And what if I do?" James let out a tense chuckle. "Aaron, any actor would kill to be in your position right now. This isn't just a role. It's a ticket to immortality. You'd be making history." Aaron knew James had a point, but there was something about that contract that he couldn't shake. The clause that mentioned control over his public image. The studio would have the right to dictate his career, his appearances, even his social media presence. He wouldn't be able to accept other roles without their approval. His personal life would be under constant surveillance. He picked up the contract and flipped through the pages again. With every line he read, the uneasy feeling grew stronger. James sighed, clearly impatient. "Look, if you have doubts, call a lawyer. Get someone to review it, but you and I both know this is Hollywood. Nothing comes for free." Aaron frowned. "What are you saying?" James avoided his gaze. "I'm saying nobody reaches the top without playing the game, Aaron. Every big actor you admire has signed something like this." Aaron swallowed hard. "And how many of them still own themselves?" James opened his mouth to answer but fell silent. And in that moment, Aaron realized He wasn't just hesitating. He was about to make the hardest decision of his life, and something deep inside him told him that if he signed that contract, he would never be the same again. Aaron spent the entire night awake. The contract sat untouched on the coffee table. He had picked it up multiple times, reread the clauses, tried to convince himself that this was a simple decision. But with every page he turned, something inside him screamed that something was off. The image control clause wasn't just a professional requirement, it was a form of ownership. The studio wanted to dictate what he could and couldn't do, both on and off the screen. The more he read, the clearer it became. This wasn't a contract, it was a pact. The next morning, he decided to get a second opinion. He called a trusted lawyer and scheduled a meeting. Arriving at the discreet office downtown, he handed over the contract. The lawyer examined the pages carefully, scanning through the fine print. After a long silence, the lawyer looked up. "Aaron, are you sure you want to sign this?" Aaron shifted in his chair. "What did you find?" The lawyer flipped through a few pages and pointed to a section. "This clause here, it essentially requires you to follow all of the studio's image guidelines without exception. That means if they decide you can't take another role for 5 years, you can't. If they demand you attend certain events, you must go. If you want to express an opinion on any topic, you'll need their approval first." A chill ran down Aaron's spine. "Is this normal?" The lawyer hesitated. "Normal? No. Common? Yes." Aaron crossed his arms. "And what happens if I break the contract?" The lawyer sighed, flipping a few more pages. "Multi-million-dollar penalties. Breach of contract that could blacklist you from working on any major film. And in more extreme cases, lawsuits that could destroy your career." Aaron leaned back in his chair, his throat dry. "So if I sign this, I'm basically giving up the right to control my own life." The lawyer closed the contract with a sigh. "Technically, yes." Aaron took the contract back. Now, he knew the truth. He also knew that if he said no, there would be consequences. What he didn't know was just how deep those consequences would go. Pierre turned down a multi-million-dollar contract, and within 24 hours, Hollywood struck back. The next morning, he woke up to dozens of missed calls. His agent, journalists, directors, everyone wanted to know what had happened. But it wasn't until he checked his social media that he realized the true impact of his decision. The first shock came with an absurd drop in his follower count. Overnight, thousands of people had unfollowed him. Some high-profile accounts started spreading rumors. Pierre turns down $1 billion role. Does he think he's too good for Hollywood? Pierre's difficult personality, is that the real reason he walked away? The attack was calculated. He hadn't even made an official statement yet, but the narrative was already being shaped. On major entertainment sites, sensational headlines started popping up. Suddenly, anonymous sources claimed he was difficult to work with and that he didn't fit well in big productions. It was a pattern, and now he finally understood what Ryan Coogler had meant. They didn't just erase those who refused to play the game, they destroyed them. His phone rang. It was James, his agent. He answered, already bracing for the worst. "Aaron, what the hell did you do?" The frustration in James's voice was palpable. "I made a decision." James let out a humorless laugh. "And in the process, you threw your career in the trash. So this is how it works? I say no, and I'm erased? Did you really think you could just walk away and come out unscathed?" His voice hardened. "You don't get it, Aaron. These guys don't take no for an answer. You didn't just turn down a movie. You turned down the people who run this industry. And now they're going to make you pay for it." Aaron clenched his phone tightly. "So they're punishing me for wanting to keep my freedom? They want you to regret it. And I'm really sorry, man, but there's nothing more I can do. The agency decided to drop you. I tried to fight it, but they don't want to get involved." A cold chill ran down Aaron's spine. "You're firing me?" The silence on the other end said it all. "It's nothing personal. It's just business." The call disconnected. Aaron stared at his phone for a moment before tossing it onto the couch. He didn't need to hear anything else. The message was loud and clear. They didn't just want him to be afraid. They wanted him to regret it. But Aaron wasn't backing down. The problem was, he had no idea what was coming next. Aaron spent the next few days trying to grasp the full extent of what had happened. Just weeks ago, his career had been soaring. Now it felt like it was crumbling before his eyes. The phone, once constantly ringing with new offers, had gone completely silent. No directors, No producers. No one. He opened his emails. The projects that had been in negotiation had vanished. Future roles that seemed like a sure thing were suddenly canceled without explanation. He had expected backlash, but he hadn't imagined it would be this swift or this brutal. And then, an unexpected email arrived. No sender, no subject, just a single line of text. You made the right choice, but you need to know what you avoided. Aaron froze. Attached to the email was a confidential document from the very studio that had offered him the contract. He opened the file and began to read. His heartbeat quickened. The clause that had unsettled him wasn't just about creative control. It went far beyond that. The contract required him to attend private events organized by the studio. That alone wasn't too unusual. Big-name actors were often invited to exclusive parties and networking gatherings. But what troubled him was the level of secrecy demanded. He wouldn't be allowed to disclose anything about these events. Not to family, not to friends, not to anyone. If he refused to attend, there would be severe financial penalties. But that wasn't the part that terrified him. Buried in the fine print were vague references to exclusive networking opportunities. The language was deliberately unclear, but the conditions were disturbing. He would be required to be available at all times for meetings with executives and strategic investors. None of these interactions could be documented. Aaron's stomach twisted. He started recalling whispers he had heard behind the scenes, stories passed around in hushed voices, rumors about private gatherings where rising actors were introduced to powerful figures in the industry. Most went along with it, no questions asked. But some, the ones who refused, disappeared. The anonymous email confirmed his worst suspicions. He shut his laptop and took a deep breath. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Pierre. The voice on the other end was cold, devoid of emotion. You already know too much. The call disconnected. A shiver ran down his spine. Now it wasn't just his career on the line, it was his safety. Aaron hung up the phone, but he kept gripping it tightly, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. That call had confirmed what he already suspected. His refusal wasn't just a professional decision. It was a direct challenge to a powerful system. In the days that followed, he watched as his life shifted drastically. Invitations to events disappeared. Contacts who once responded to his messages instantly now ignored him. Even friends in the industry started to distance themselves. The silence from Hollywood was deafening. But what truly terrified him was realizing that he was being followed. The first time it happened, he had gone out for a morning run. He noticed a black car parked across the street from his building. He brushed it off. But the next day, the same car was there. And the day after that. One night, as he was heading home, he felt someone behind him. He turned quickly, but the street was empty. His neighborhood was supposed to be safe, but suddenly, every shadow felt like a threat. Paranoia started creeping in. He decided to call Ryan Coogler, the only person who seemed to understand what was happening. Ryan, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Aaron, I know what you're going through. Aaron felt a lump in his throat. They're erasing me, Ryan. And now, I feel like I'm being watched. There was a long pause on the other end. This isn't paranoia, Aaron. This is real. Aaron swallowed hard. What do I do? You have two choices. Either you disappear for a while and let this blow over, or you fight back. But if you choose to fight, understand this. There's no way back. Aaron stood still, absorbing those words. He had never been one to run. He had never allowed himself to be manipulated. But this time, the enemy was invisible. And the only thing he knew for sure was that they weren't going to stop. That night, as he lay in bed trying to sleep, the intercom buzzed. He hesitated before answering. Mr. Pierre, we have a message for you. The voice was unfamiliar. Who is this? A tense silence. You already know. The intercom clicked off on its own. A cold chill ran down Aaron's spine. He wasn't just being blacklisted from the industry. He was being warned. And maybe, the next step would be something much worse. Aaron spent days trying to figure out just how far this would go. He already knew his career in Hollywood was over. The contract he had turned down wasn't just another role. It was an invitation to a game where he would have no control over his own life. But by saying no, he had become a problem. Now he was being followed, watched, threatened. But if they thought he was going to hide, they were wrong. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he never thought he'd use. "This is Aaron Pierre. I accept the meeting." The response was almost immediate. "Good choice, we'll be expecting you." That night, Aaron drove to a discreet building in downtown Los Angeles. A place that didn't stand out, no signs, no markings. A security guard met him at the entrance and led him to a private room. Inside, seated around a sleek glass table, were 3 men in suits, studio executives. The oldest of them smiled. "We knew you'd come around." Aaron kept his expression neutral. "I didn't." The men exchanged confused glances. Aaron reached inside his jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table. "Inside this, there's everything you don't want the world to know." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. "What are you talking about?" one of the executives asked, trying to keep his composure. Aaron leaned forward. "I found out about the contracts, the private events, the actors who disappeared after refusing you. I have emails, audio recordings, witnesses, and I'm ready to make it all public." The silence was deafening. Then the older man smiled again. "You really think you can threaten us?" Aaron pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward them. He was live, streaming the entire conversation. The executives froze. "This isn't your game to control anymore." Aaron stood up, grabbed the envelope, and walked out of the room. That night, social media exploded. Aaron Pierre exposed everything. The abusive contracts, the invisible rules, the system that controlled Hollywood's biggest faces. And this time, they couldn't erase him.